Hey all, Eskie here, bringing you a video about what is Deadlock. So I imagine a lot of you guys have heard about Deadlock now, maybe watched a streamer play Deadlock, seen Deadlock gameplay. And so Valve just recently lifted the NDA, and there were even leaks early on, and a lot of those people were saying, hey, well, Deadlock's just Overwatch, it's just Apex Legends, another hero shooter, when I really think that couldn't be further from the truth. I think Deadlock really boils down to being a MOBA with third-person shooter mechanics. So the goal of the game is not necessarily to get kills, it's to farm and use that farm to take objectives, eventually killing the enemy team's patron, which wins you the game. So the kills, they help you take objectives, they increase your farm, which makes you more powerful, but they're not the main focus of the game. So short channel introduction. I've played in the alpha since May. I play in fairly high MMR games. I've played MOBAs and FPSs for a very long time. And this channel will have a lot of Deadlock gameplay with high-level commentary. So what are the differences between Deadlock and other MOBAs? Well, I think it's really two big things right now. And that's, in lane, you could be a solo lane, but there's also duo lanes. And in those duo lanes, the farm is shared between you and your lane partner. So if you last hit a creep, that farm will be shared with that lane partner. And this leads into my second point, which is there's really not defined roles at this point. There's not defined junglers. There's not defined carries. The jungle mobs don't even spawn until much later in the game. They don't spawn right when the game starts. So this leads to there not really being defined roles. Everyone has the potential to carry. Everyone has the potential to support. And I think that's a really great thing about Deadlock right now. So what should you expect if you're a first-person shooter player? Well, heroes and abilities do function similar to Overwatch, but that's pretty much where the similarity stops in my mind, because you're able to upgrade your abilities to make them more powerful or maybe reduce the cooldown. The time to kill is also going to be much higher in the early game than your typical match of like Overwatch, for example. And so you're not really going to be focusing on killing people in the early game. You should really be focusing on farming and getting your soul count up so you can buy items, level your character up. I would say the game also has some very distinct phases. So early game, that's when you're pretty much sitting in lane, farming, trying to take the enemy's turret. And then I would say the transition to mid game tends to happen when a couple of the turrets have fallen. People will start rotating to other lanes to either gank or take that turret. And then after that, you see a lot of roaming, farming, doing some jungle. And then in the late game, you're really just trying to fight for the mid boss, trying to take objectives, push to the enemy patron, and win. So what should you expect as a MOBA player? Well, aim is going to be very important in this game. If you can't aim, you're not going to be able to farm well. And if you don't farm well, you're going to feel weak and you're not going to be effective in the game. Also, like I said previously, there's not really defined roles. So you can't really think of someone as a dedicated support player or a dedicated jungle player. I think you will have like a main, for example, or a few heroes that you play a lot, but you're not going to be defined in a role, at least yet. And then finally, the movement mechanics in this game are very important. So when you press shift, you can dodge, you can do a dodge jump to make you kind of accelerate in the air. There's a sliding mechanic as well. So there's a bunch of movement, and that's going to be a huge part of this game as well, is having good movement to be able to dodge abilities. So what are my recommendations for new players? I think spending time in the sandbox and just learning what the heroes do, what their abilities are, what their ultimates are, is going to be a huge boon, especially early on, because so many MOBAs are very knowledge dependent, right? Understanding what the enemy heroes are capable of and what their kit. Does it do bullet damage? Does it do spirit damage? Should I be building bullet defense or spirit defense? Or maybe the enemy team has a lot of CC characters and I need to build something like Unstoppable so that I'm not getting CC'd constantly in the fight. I think those things are very important to learn early on so that you can kind of adjust your build based on the enemy team. And then I would also recommend just kind of like simplifying the game early on. There's just so much to do in this game, right? There's movement mechanics. You have to aim all the time. You got to use your abilities, level up your abilities. You got to figure out a build, buy those items, roam around the map. Just so much to do, and it's such a big cognitive load early on when you're not used to it. So I would really recommend simplifying the game down and just focus on farming and taking objectives. Especially early on in lane, what I see a lot of people do is you're like constantly harassing the enemy team, trying to get that hero kill. but you really should just be focusing on farming. Farming in the early game is a huge, huge deal. And if you don't do it, you're going to fall very far behind and you're going to feel a lot weaker in the mid and the late game. And then the last thing I would recommend is focus on limiting your downtime and not dying. So what am I defining as downtime? Really, to me, downtime in a MOBA is spending time at the fountain buying, spending time in the fountain regenerating your health because you got chunked, or sitting on a death timer. So when you're doing those things, you're not farming, you're not putting pressure on the map to take objectives, you're not helping your team in a team fight. And those are all the important things you should be doing in a MOBA. So really focusing on just farming efficiently and limiting your downtime. Don't die. Don't, take too many big risks where you're going to be sitting on a death timer, I think is going to help you a lot early on. And then as you get that experience, you're going to learn more about the game, develop a game sense, and you can focus on other things like maybe movement mechanics, for example. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope this was helpful. If you like, please, do all the YouTube stuff. Help me with the YouTube algorithm. Hit all those buttons. Subscribe. Would really appreciate it. I will see you guys in some Deadlock gameplay in the future.